You are listening to Book Clips, a podcast where authors and narrators expose you to excerpts from different books. You can find the show and more by searching for The Lesbian Talk Show on iTunes, Podbean, or Stitcher.
Jen Silver, reading from Carved in Stone, Book 3 of the Starling Hill trilogy. This is from the last few scenes in Chapter 2. When Ellie doesn't show up for their agreed lunch appointment, Robin gets worried and eventually tracks her down to the British Museum, where the exhibition for the finds from the archaeological dig on their farm had just opened to the public. Inside the gallery, Robin waited a moment to let her eyes adjust to the darkened interior. There was a large crowd gathered around the heads. Ellie must have been one of the first visitors to arrive. Robin could see her, seemingly oblivious to anyone else, standing directly in front of the reconstructed face of Queen Cartamandua. A few people moved off to look at another exhibit, and Robin was able to get through to Ellie without having to push anyone aside. Only when she got there did she realise that Ellie's eyes were closed. She glanced at the Queen. The modeller had given her a haughty look. It wasn't a kind face, but then she had lived in difficult times, and being the leader of the largest tribe in Britain wouldn't have been easy for anyone, male or female, in the first century. Ellie's eyes flicked open, and she turned to Robin. "Hi, sweetie." Robin swallowed back the emotional response that had been building for the last hour. "How did you know I was here?" "The Queen told me." The Queen. Robin looked at the 3D model again and stared back imperiously. "Is it lunchtime?" Yes. Robin grasped her hand. It was cold. "Come on, love." Ellie didn't resist as she pulled her out of the crowd and out through the gallery doors. Once in the large atrium, Robin breathed a sigh of relief. Inside the gallery, she'd felt as if the air was pressing down on her. "Rob, I'm so sorry. I didn't realise what time it was." They were sitting in their hotel room, the remains of a room service sandwich mostly uneaten on the plate in front of her. Ellie stared at the back of Robin's head. Robin turned away from the window. "I think we should go home today." She hadn't touched much of her lunch either. "But I thought you wanted to go down the river to take a look at the Cutty Sark." "The weather's not that great. We can go another time." Ellie was troubled by the look on Robin's face. She had been in too much of a daze when Robin turned up at the museum to notice her partner's agitation. Instead of going to a restaurant as they'd agreed when they parted after breakfast, Robin wanted to come back to the hotel. It had taken Ellie a while to notice how upset she was. When she finally asked her how the meeting went, Robin just shrugged and said it was a bust, nothing else. "Well, if that's what you really want, I don't mind." "Okay, good." Decision made, Robin leapt into action. She raced around, throwing clothes into the suitcase, taking a bit more time to make sure she had all the electronic devices, chargers, stored in her backpack. "You do the toiletries, Elle. I'll ring reception to let them know, so they can have the bill ready for us and order a taxi." There wasn't much left to pack. Ellie folded up the few things she'd hung in the wardrobe and checked the drawers for any stray socks or knickers. While she was in the bathroom, she could hear Robin on the phone. It sounded like she was talking to Joe. Ellie was happy to be going home. There was a picture forming in her mind, a picture that wanted to be painted. The call from Robin on the Monday afternoon cheered Joe immensely. She was relieved they were coming home earlier than planned. Another night of listening to the silence, knowing there wasn't another person within a mile of the place, would have been hard. Watching her two friends when they arrived back at the farm, Joe wondered what had happened. They seemed out of sorts with each other. Robin had taken off on her motorbike after dumping their suitcase and her backpack in the living room. Ellie had given Joe a brief smile and said she had something she wanted to do in the studio. Wonderful. Now she was alone again. After making up the fire to get a good blaze, she settled down to read. Harry made himself comfortable on the couch next to her, while the cats occupied Ellie's armchair. Even while she had the house to herself, she hadn't used the chair. It was very much Ellie's space. The sound of the bike brought Jo out of her reverie. She realised she hadn't read more than a few pages of her book in the last hour. It was one of Ellie's history books, and maybe not the best thing to keep her attention for long. Robin appeared, nodded to her, and picking up the suitcase, headed upstairs. A few minutes later, Jo heard the shower running. She looked back at the book. It was no good. She couldn't concentrate on finding out how the sudden withdrawal of the Roman troops from Britain affected the native tribes. When Robin came back downstairs, Joe was staring into the fire and thinking about putting another log on. "I'm going to get a beer. Do you want anything?" Robin asked from the doorway. "Yeah, a beer would be great." Robin came back with 2 bottles of Corona and placed them on the table. She then found her backpack and pulled her iPad out. Harry wasn't pleased to be disturbed, but he moved over when Robin gave him a gentle shove to let him know she wanted to sit next to Joe. "Got some photos. Do you want to see them?" "Sure." Joe put the book down and picked up a bottle. She enjoyed a long swallow of beer while Robin located the pictures. There were the usual tourist shots of places in London. Ellie outside Buckingham Palace next to an unsmiling guard. Ellie getting on the London Eye. Pictures of the river. A couple of close-up selfies of the 2 of them. They looked happy and relaxed. "Do you have any of the exhibition?" "I couldn't take any as they don't allow it in the gallery. But Den sent me some of the publicity ones." Robin scrolled through her photos and found them. There was one of the 2 skeletons in their glass cases, and several of the 3D reconstructions of the heads taken from different angles. "Wow, that's amazing. So lifelike. They look like they could talk." "Yeah." Robin sighed and closed the app. She put the iPad down and picked up her beer. "What's going on with you 2? You look really happy in those photos." Robin sighed again. She stroked Fleur, who had woken up when she sat down, and decided to take the opportunity to sit on her lap. "I'm worried about Ellie." Joe waited. "This morning, she returned to the gallery. It was what we had planned. Ed had given her a pass. I had a meeting with a prospective client, so we arranged to meet at 12 back at the hotel." Robin described how worried she'd been waiting for her, pacing back and forth in reception, checking her phone every few minutes for messages. She told Joe about having to contact Catherine, getting a pass arranged for herself, and then finding Ellie standing in front of the Queen. "She was in a trance, Joe. When I turned up, she opened her eyes. She said Cartamandu had told her I was there. And then she spent most of the train journey sketching something in her notepad." "Awesome. She could be channeling the Queen." "Don't you think it's a bit scary? She's obsessed." "You're jealous," Joe laughed. "Of a 2,000-year-old skeleton. Yeah, right." "Well, you are. What was she drawing?" "I don't know. It just looked like a field. Could be somewhere around here, like a lot of her paintings." Ellie looked at the outline on the canvas. It was as she imagined it. No, that was wrong. It was as the Queen described it. She stretched and glanced at her watch. It was much later than she expected. Her stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten anything since the tuna baguette they'd shared on the train. Robin had bought it before they got on, saying they wouldn't get anything decent from the buffet car. Robin, she needed to talk to her, but how could she explain what was going on in her head without sounding like a nutcase? Satisfied now that she had the preliminary sketch done, she could apply the colours in the morning. She walked across the yard to the house and was charmed by the cosy scene, the fire, Joe and Robin, the cats, Harry. They all looked settled and warm. She was chilled to the bone. "Hi, do you guys want anything to eat?" They both looked at her, startled. Had they been talking about her? "I thought of putting together some cheese and crackers and a glass of red wine. More beer?" "Yeah, sure, I'll get them." Robin followed her into the kitchen. They worked together in silence. Ellie put crackers and cheese out on the wooden cutting board. Robin got plates and knives together and some strips of kitchen roll to serve as napkins. She took more bottles of Corona from the fridge, sliced the lime to put in the necks. Ellie poured her wine. "Rob?" Robin turned, her eyes betraying the concern she'd held all day. "I'm sorry. I can't really explain what's going on. It's just I have this strong sense of connection. I need you to hold me, to feel grounded again." Her lover closed the gap between them quickly and embraced her. She stroked her hair. "Oh God, Ellie, I was scared." Ellie immediately felt warmed by Robin's closeness, her anchor to the real world. After a few minutes, she pulled away. "We better go back in before Joe thinks we've abandoned her." She kissed Robin lightly on the lips. "It will be okay, as long as I know you're here for me. Always." Jen Silver, reading from Carved in Stone, Book 3 of the Starling Hill trilogy.
This was an episode of Book Clips. Check out the show notes for more on this book. And it would be great if you would rate the show and subscribe to the Lesbian Talk Show podcast channel for more woman-centered content. If you are an author of lesbian fiction, then send us your reading. You can find out how on thelesbiantalkshow.com/reading.